Good evening. Welcome to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan Findings Meeting. I'm Kimberly Garrett. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Georgetown. It's so good to see all y'all out here today and the people listening in on Zoom. We're excited to get to this process and share this important information with the community. This is just one piece of the puzzle, and we're excited to bring that to the citizens today. Our plan is to go through the entire presentation and then take questions at the end. And then for the visitors that we have on Zoom, we will allow you to ask questions as well at the end of the presentation. Please use the raise your hand feature, and we will call on you in sequential order. So at this time, I would like to introduce Dan Cedar. He's the project manager for Greenplay, and he's been leading our efforts through this master plan process.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and for those that are virtually attending through Zoom. Again, my name is Dan Cedar. I'm with Greenplay. We're a national parks and recreation consulting firm based out of Louisville, Colorado. We've been doing this for over 20 years. I'm a former parks and recreational. I worked in the field for 25 plus years professionally. I've been with Greenplay now for 5 years. I'm actually based out of Omaha, Nebraska. The rest of our team, I'll do a quick introductions. We've got Dave Peterson that will be speaking tonight to be going over our outdoor inventory level service analysis. We also have Teresa Jackson with Greenplay. We have Mick Massey with BRS. And then we have some other team members that aren't here. We have Covey Landscape, a local firm that's also assisting us with the project, as well as RRC and Associates. They're a national survey firm, and hopefully those of you that are in attendance and those of you on Zoom were able to take part in the survey, but they did the survey for us. So tonight, what the plan is to take you through, this is what we call our findings report. So we're going to go over what the vision of this master plan is, what we had established. I'll go over the project schedule with you real quick, just to show you where we're at in the project. We'll then go through the community survey and show the key findings from the survey. The survey is actually like a 70-page report, but we're just pulling out the highlights from those key findings that I'll cover. Then I'll turn the time over for Dave, who will go through the outdoor inventory. And then Mick will lead us through the indoor recreation findings. And then we'll go through kind of the next steps of this process and then wrap up, like Kimberly said, with a Q&A. The one thing I want to note is everything you see tonight, these are not decisions, nothing is final. This is just kind of the findings from all the analysis work that we've completed so far. So anything you see up here, I just want to reiterate, these are not findings, or sorry, not actual results that are recommendations at this point. This first slide just kind of goes over what the vision of this master plan is. It is a guide for the department to lead them over the next 10 years. One of the biggest factors we wanted this is to be community driven, establish a clear direction to guide the department through the growth and development and enhancement of the community parks, public spaces, recreation programs, services, and facilities. The plan will be used, we'll use community engagement to create the 10-year vision for the department. What we try to do with Greenplay with all of our plans is to be as transparent as possible. We want to drive as much community engagement. So that's why we're here with findings presentation. We're showing you what we've done so far. We're also looking for more input from you tonight as well. This will provide an action plan with concise and innovative recommendations to achieve the vision. Will be an update the inventory and analysis of the indoor and outdoor facilities to position Georgetown to build on its unique charm and character. We'll maximize the department resources to expand the recreation opportunities throughout the city. This will become an element of the city's 2030 comprehensive plan. And we are also presenting a plan, or we will be completing a plan that will meet the Texas Parks and Wildlife Master Plan requirements. And this is just a recap of the schedule. It started out in May, where we did a public meeting, and we also had a virtual kickoff. This is our first actual on-site public meeting since COVID. So we're happy to be out here tonight. In June, we did the community needs assessment survey. So that's when the survey went out. In the meantime, in May, Dave was out going through all your parks, doing an inventory of your entire system. BRS was out looking at your indoor facilities as well. Right now, we're in August with the public meetings presentation. And then tomorrow we do kind of a visioning session with the staff. And then when we leave town, we'll be setting up another visioning session with the project team, probably in about 2 weeks. We then lead to our draft presentation where we'll come in with a draft of the master plan, probably about 90% complete with some initial recommendations and action items. We're shooting for November for that. And then we, again, will provide public input in a public meeting setting, look for more feedback, make changes and updates to that draft plan in December, looking towards a January final plan. So I've got a few slides to go over the community survey. This first one is just a breakdown of the methodology, how the survey was developed. Overall, we received 2,036 surveys. There are two parts to the survey. The first part is the statistically valid survey. So that is the survey that was mailed at random throughout Georgetown City. Then we also had the open link survey. So the statistically valid survey hit the homes. And once it was in the homes for about 2 weeks, we then provide an open link. And that open link is for anyone to go on and complete the survey. And as you can see the numbers, there were 491 invitation surveys completed, which is, it's a good result. 1,545 open link surveys. We also broke up, you may have picked up a map on your way in. We asked people to really identify where they live based on the parkland dedication zones. So this is a breakdown of the zones. On the left-hand side is the overall results of where people lived when they completed the survey. The invite is in the middle in blue. So again, those are the people that received the statistically valid survey. And then the open link is on the far right-hand side in the orange. So that's just a breakdown of where people were located who filled out the survey. You know, one thing with the open link, they tend to be people who know the system a little bit better, probably a lot of your users. And then that invite survey is the community at large. So key findings, I have about 4 to 5 slides here just to kind of give you a highlight of what we found with the survey. So on the first slide here on the left-hand side, importance of facilities and services. So we asked on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, most important, resident households rated what are the most important facilities to your household. And I'll get into some more detailed survey results later, but we found the top 3 were amenities at parks, trails and pathways, and parks and open spaces. And you can see the scores next to them. Those were all above a 4.0, so pretty high scoring on what the 3 most important facilities were. And then below it is the programs and services. So what were the most important programs and services to your household? And we saw fitness programs, adult recreation programs, and senior programs. And in that area, we also have a slide that'll show you there were a lot of other programs that were scored right below that, but these were the 3 that were the highest. The next one on the right-hand side is the needs met for your facilities and services. So in terms of facilities and services meeting the needs of the community, respondents felt that the following are meeting the needs the best. So this is how I feel they're meeting the needs of the entire community. And here we saw trails and pathways again, rated at a 4.0, amenities at parks, 3.9, youth athletics and senior programs were rated the highest. And then you can see that skateboard parks and environmental programs are rated lower at 3.2 and 3.1, still above a 3.0, but lower on that scale. Increased use. So here you were asked to identify what would make me increase the use of your parks? What would get me out into the parks more? And here we saw improved communication about what you offer, what's out there, better lighting, and better maintenance. Through the open link, there was a higher response rate to the better lighting, and then having facilities closer to where I live would increase my use of your parks. We did ask about transportation, just get a feel for how people get around the city and how they access their parks. And here we found motor vehicles most preferred method of transportation. Funding sources on the bottom right-hand side. We asked 3 different types of funding questions. Nearly 75% of respondents said that they would probably or definitely support more private-public partnerships as potential funding sources. And then we also saw positive support for bond referendums for special projects, where 59% of respondents basically scored a 4 or 5 on that, identified that they would support bond referendums. A couple more here. Future facility needs. So here we were asked, what are the most important items to focus on as we look at facilities and amenities in the future? And the top 3, adding trails in neighborhood parks or connecting parks to city trail systems, acquiring land for new parks in the underserved areas, and better maintenance. And as you can see, the scores next to those, pretty high scores. On the right-hand side, future program needs. What are most important needs for the future programs and services? And on the invite survey, we saw that more after school and summer programs scored the highest at 3.6. And then when we looked at the invite and the open link, we've also had more fitness, wellness, and health programs overall being offered, or programs we would like to see for the future. And then as part of this, we were looking at the indoor recreation center, and Mick will get into much more detail on this, but we did ask some questions on the indoor recreation center, and we found that gymnasium amenities were the most important amenities for a new indoor recreation center, with the top 2 amenities being fitness areas with weights and cardio equipment and group exercise rooms. So a couple more slides to just go into a little more detail. Again, the overall report's about 70 pages long, so I'm not going through the entire survey, but just wanted to show you kind of where these key findings came out and then where other things kind of fell in line. So this is the amenities usage slide. These are the following amenities that your household uses when visiting facilities. And you can answer as many of these. We're basically asking, what facilities do you use when you're out in the parks? And again, you can see those 3 numbers, trails, restrooms, and open space, all scored pretty high compared to the others. I'm not going to read through every one of them, but you can also look across the board. The left-hand side is the overall survey results, and then the invite is in blue, and the open link is in orange. And they pretty much, you can see the pattern match up pretty closely as you work your way down. But this just gives us a good idea, what are people using? What are they out doing when they're in your parks and your amenities? Next slide is looking at current conditions. And so how important are the following facilities and services to your household? And on this slide, I kind of broke down those park dedicated zone areas just to give you an idea of where people answered based on where they live as well. So on the left-hand side, again, that's your overall score. And then zone 1 is in pink, zone 2 is in green, zone 3 in blue, and zone 4 is in that light orange. And again, even as you look through the different zones, the surveys match up pretty well on the results. Trails, pathways, parks, open spaces, and amenities are the most important facilities to the households. As you work your way down, a lot of those are falling under 3. So that just gives us a good idea that, that 3.5 range and higher, I said that earlier with the project team, recreation centers and aquatic facilities scored up there as well. They just didn't match quite as high as those top 3, but you kind of have a top 5 when you really look at those numbers. So we saw on that last slide what's important. Now we're looking at what are meeting the needs the best. How do you think these facilities and amenities are currently meeting the needs of the community? And again, here, this is kind of the percentage breakdown on the answers, for 1 and 2 on the left-hand side, that's the lowest. We don't think they're meeting the needs of the community. 4 and 5 are your higher scoring. They are meeting the needs. And this is just showing you again that the trails and pathways, amenities at parks and park and open spaces, all above 70%. This is the invite sample results. So this is your statistically valid survey. You've got a lot there in that 60% range: diamond athletic fields, rectangular fields, the dog parks, the recreation centers, and then again, it works its way down through some of the other amenities. The importance of current programs and services. So now we're looking at the programs and services. And this one, I put up the zones again, because we did see through this question that in zone 4, you can see it's highlighted there at the bottom that the youth athletics and youth recreation programs and youth camps actually scored higher than the average score in zone 4. So that's just telling us in zone 4, the youth the youth activities and the youth programs are scoring a little higher in terms of importance compared to the other zones. But this again breaks it down. All of these, right around that 3.0 range. Your top one fitness programs kind of stands out at 3.6 when you look at the overall score. But then again, when you look at it through the zone areas, you've got 3.4, 3.3, and 3.2 with youth camps, youth recreation, and youth athletics. And this type of information, a lot of these slides and a lot of the survey is very useful for staff as we break this down, and they've got a much more detailed report that can show those areas, so we can really break down into those zone areas. So this one is now asking how well the current programs are meeting the needs of the community. And here you can see, overall the scores are pretty close as you work your way down. Youth athletics and senior programs rate the highest at 3.7 on meeting the needs of the community. But really the lowest score down in environmental programs is a 3.2. So there's not a huge discrepancy, especially as you work your way down, special events at 3.5, aquatic programs. So, and that also shows in the results when you look over on the right-hand side in the 4 and 5 scores, pretty consistent down through there. So this is telling us, overall, I told the staff you'd like to see these numbers at 3.5 or higher. So in terms of meeting the needs, they're there, but we know we can make some improvements, especially with those lower numbers. But overall, it's showing your programming is kind of consistent in terms of meeting the needs to the entire city. Future facilities, programs, and services. So here, this is breaking down. There was a question that basically asked you to identify what you want to see for future facilities. But then the next question said, okay, if you had 12 options, and let's say you answered all 12 of those, now pick your top 3 future facilities that you would like to see as a priority to your household. And here, adding trails and parks and connecting trails and the trail system overall scored the highest, 70% overall. The open link, it showed 72%. That's telling us that's the number one, most important. And honestly, almost every survey we do in every community, in every project I've been throughout the United States, trails is always up there as one of the top ones. If not the top, it's top 2. That's just what people want right now, is they want to be connected. They want to have access to trails. And that's what we're seeing. Acquiring land for the underserved areas, again, 57%, and then better maintenance of existing parks and facilities, 42%. So those 3, again, quite a bit higher as you look down to the rest of the priorities that people have when you really ask them to nail down those top 3. And then this is the top 3 future needs for programs and services. And here, more fitness, wellness, and health programs really jump to the top with 70% of respondents. And then really you can look at those next 3, more adult programming, more senior programming, and the additional after school and summer programs are pretty close there, just below 50%. And then the teen and youth programs and special events. But then on the flip side, if we were to look at this through I say sub areas, but the park dedication zones, the youth and teen programs probably in zone 4 would be up there a little bit higher than these other ones. And then this slide, the next slide is on the financial choices. So again, we threw a funding support question on there just to see, what people would say in terms of support for the future of the department. And this just shows you the breakdown of those response rates. The first one is the more private-public partnerships, very strong support there with 73% through the invite sample, 74% through the open link, and that's the people who picked the 4s and the 5s. Bond referendum for special projects, 59% through the invite sample, a little more support through your open link respondents with 64%. And then increasing user fees. We did see that was the one that had lower response rate, that wasn't as supported. And when we actually broke that down by the park dedication zones, we saw a couple of zones where it was even higher, where people would be more affected if you raised my fees. The question was asked, would you be somewhat affected, or trying to remember the exact wording, and they all fell in line with being somewhat or overly affected if you were to raise my fees. So that's the one area we saw more of a negative response. Now I'll turn it over to Dave to go over your outdoor.
Thank you, Dan. So we came to town at the end of May and I went out to all the parks in town and we made a digital map, a GIS map, if you will. This is an example of that map. All of the dark green areas are city parks and facilities. Went around and visited each of those. These were some of the things that we saw when we were out looking at the parks. Overall, we thought the parks were in good condition. So this idea that the survey came back that we needed more maintenance. Maintenance is always a time and a place thing. So, it could have been that a user had seen, garbage piled up in one park at one point and that affected their survey. We generally saw that the parks were well maintained. We're often looking at how are parks branded in Georgetown, and we saw consistent signage. So as we went to a park, we knew that was a City of Georgetown park. That's always a positive aspect. We did see some access issues, especially ADA access to certain components. One of those examples is the use of plastic curb walls at playgrounds, and that tends to limit access into playgrounds. So there's some suggestions as we move in through the process. We saw some difference in turf conditions at different parks. So maybe it's irrigation, maybe it's mowing. Those types of things affect turf conditions. We found limited to no open diamonds. So baseball fields, softball fields, and rectangle fields tended to be more associated with programming opportunities. So we have youth sports that are using these fields and they're not necessarily open. If you want to go throw the ball with your daughter or kick the soccer ball with your son, limited opportunities for field use to the general public. We found numerous undeveloped and underdeveloped properties. So some parks that are less developed than say San Gabriel, which has a ton of things going on. We're really going out and looking at parks to see kind of what opportunities are there in a park for me to recreate. What are the things that I can do? Where are all the tennis courts? Where are all the basketball courts, picnic shelters, kind of those types of things. So that's really what we're doing. It's a component based. So rather than just count the acres of each park, we're counting the number of things and the quality of things that are going on at parks. And again, limited walkability across the system. So from where I live, can I walk to a park within 10 minutes? So there's a big national movement right now to allow people to walk to a quality park within 10 minutes of their house. National Recreation and Park Association has this movement. Trust for Public Lands is on board. There's a council of mayors. So kind of all across the country, we're trying to increase walkability of our cities. And we found that Georgetown has some limits in walkability, if you will. We also were interested, we're really interested into not just what does the City of Georgetown provide, but what do people have access to all over the area. And so went out and looked at some of these other alternative providers, if you will, that may be in the city or next to the city, things that people may be using in the area. So this is a list of some of those opportunities that people may use outside of Georgetown city parks. Obviously, Sun City is a big provider to their residents, and we wanted to recognize that they are providing services to their residents. HOAs, MUDs, private golf clubs, all are providing these recreation opportunities kind of throughout the community. We heard in the survey that trails is huge and people want trails, and we see that, like Dan said, in pretty much every survey we do across the country. And so this is an example of where trails are currently in Georgetown and a breakdown by color by the ownership of those. Again, it all comes back to what do people have access to? People often don't care whether it's Wolf Ranch that's providing the trail, whether it's County Trail, Army Corps of Engineer Trail, or City of Georgetown. They just want to know that they can get on a trail at somewhere. Again, there's numbers here. Georgetown itself is providing almost 20 miles of trails. Army Corps of Engineers, almost 34 miles. the county 11.5 miles. So a lot of trails out in the community. So why are we getting this feedback that we need to provide more trails? We often talk about part of connecting trails is actually connecting people to trails and making sure that people know that there's a trailhead there that I can go park there. How do I connect citizens to those trails? Do they know where that trail goes when they get there? So there's some things besides just point A to point B that we can do, but begin to connect people to trails. Maybe something we look at. Like I said, we went out and looked at each park. We created a map of each park, each of City of Georgetown's parks. So there's a map on the left here. We have that boundary. We know how many acres that park is. But again, we're really interested in what's going on in that park. How many different things are there to do in a park? So at Chautauqua Park, we have the list down below. It says there's a trail access point, there's a natural area, there's open water, open turf, there's a large shelter you can go have a picnic at. There's a playground, there's a practice diamond field, one of those fields that you could actually go and throw the ball with your son or daughter. There's a basketball court, there's a small shelter, and there's a passive node. So again, all of those different things to do in that park. We've assigned a quality value to each of those. We also know that there's certain things in parks that you can put in there that make people stay more comfortable or convenient. So are there restrooms at the park that I can use when I take my kids there? And I don't have to drive home, or I don't have to drive to McDonald's to find a restroom. So key important things like that. Are there drinking fountains, places to get out of the sun, get in the shade? Kind of all of those things factor into this overall score that we assign to a park. So all that's kind of calculated in this sheet. We create this big database, and we can sort that database. This gets turned over to the city when we're done, and now they know where every basketball court is in town. We know the quality of those basketball courts in town. We know where they're located because they have a GIS point. You could put it in Google and you can drive there and locate it, all of those things. So you could do this with playgrounds. You could do it with picnic shelters. Kind of all of this is now in GIS and sortable. As you could see, it was raining the day we were here. So we're talking about those park scores. We can begin to rank parks based on which parks provide the most and the best things to go do. And this is probably no surprise that San Gabriel provides the most and best park experience in Georgetown. There's a ton of stuff to do in San Gabriel Park. Gary Park, McMaster Athletic Complex, again, all rank really high in that kind of overall things to do. We know not all parks are going to score the same. We're not going to provide San Gabriel in every neighborhood. We don't want that in every neighborhood. In neighborhoods, we want smaller parks. We want parks with just a few things. We want to be able to walk to a park with a playground, maybe a basketball court, maybe a loop walk, maybe a piece of open turf, kind of those things that everybody should have access to within walking distance of their house. So again, kind of this ranking or scoring of those parks by which ones provide the most and best stuff. We can begin to compare Georgetown to other agencies that we've done across the country. So our current data set, we've visited, worked with 79 different agencies across the country. I've been to over 5,000 parks across the country and looked at over almost 28,000 playgrounds, picnic shelters, tennis courts, kind of all of those things. So we can compare you to all of these other agencies across the country. 3 of your parks, those top 3 parks, score in the top 100 of all parks. So out of those 5,000 parks, 3 of them are in the top 100 and 4 of them are in the top 10%. So again, I think this is something that Georgetown should celebrate, that we have these high quality parks, even at that level. We can also compare you to other similar size agencies. So we know that, there's certain size communities that provide different types of parks. And so we begin to look at what we call benchmarking, or trying to compare you to other similar size agencies. So we looked at agencies about 75,000 people, and then we had a couple of other Texas communities, Angleton and Pearland, that we've worked in recently. Some others that were more distant out. These were some of the things that we saw, was that Georgetown is in the upper ranks of total locations, so total number of parks, parks per capita or parks per 1,000 people, and components per capita. They rank lower in components per location and average score per location. And we know that components per location and score are directly related. So it doesn't surprise me that we have some of those parks that were very low on that list that scored low. It's because they don't have very many components, and that's bringing down that average on those parks. But overall, total locations were good, and parks per 1,000 people were good. We talked a few minutes ago about NRPA, so the National Recreation and Park Association keeps track of statistics also with parks agencies across the country. And they put out these park metrics. These are not standards. These are not guidelines. They're just a comparison to the median as to what other agencies are doing. In general, we saw that diamond fields and kind of in general rectangles were pretty good. Dog parks were okay. Lots of playgrounds compared to other cities across the country. Maybe we're a little short in basketball courts and community gardens. The skate park was about on. We know maybe we need to upgrade our skate park, but the fact that you have one skate park for this size of community seems to be appropriate. And tennis courts were a little bit behind on tennis courts. I'll note that NRPA does not track pickleball. And so we get a lot of feedback on pickleball, but NRPA, this is one of the limitations of doing these types of comparisons is what do people track across the country? And they do not yet track pickleball. For all you pickleball fans out there. So we talked a minute ago about walkability, and we like to think of the 880 rule, if you will. And when we think about walkable access to things from your house, and the question really is on the 880 rule is, would you send your 8-year-old daughter or your 80-year-old father across that street to a park on the other side? If you would not, then we consider that a major pedestrian barrier. And we limit our level of service provided by a park by those types of guidelines. So this is an example of those guidelines. This is the walkable access that we determined for Georgetown. And the darker the orange gradients in these maps, hopefully you can see some of the gradient variations. The darker the orange, the higher the level of service. So if you look close to San Gabriel Park, you see dark orange. If you look in that area around Edwards Park, we see dark orange. As we move out into the community, we see lesser orange, lighter orange, if you will. Where we see gray, those are areas where people do not have walkable access, or they have to get in their car and go further than a 10-minute walk to get to a park or recreation opportunity. Again, darker the orange means more and better things within walking distance of my house, within a 10-minute walk. Here's a couple examples of what that really means. Again, we talked about San Gabriel Park. In this case, if I live close to San Gabriel Park or within walking distance of San Gabriel Park, which we know not a whole lot of people live within walking distance of San Gabriel Park. So it's not providing a whole lot of walkable level of service. But if you happen to live within walking distance, you can access 48 different components. So 48 different things that you can go do at San Gabriel Park. One park, 48 things. If you live in the Edwards Park area, you can access 32 different components, but they're at 7 different parks. So a lot more parks provide 32 opportunities, but that level of service is spread out more than at San Gabriel and a little bit more of a walkable neighborhood. So that really kind of gives you an idea of those orange gradients, if you will, and why they vary. In some neighborhoods, you may only have access to 1 or 2 components within walking distance. And that's why you have a lower, less dark orange area maybe. So what those orange gradients don't tell us is what should that level of service be. We talked about we're not going to provide San Gabriel in every neighborhood. We know that. So what should that level of service be? So this map attempts to kind of draw that line in the sand and says, everybody in Georgetown should at least have access to this many things within walking distance of their house. And so in this case, if I live in a purple area, I have access to at least 3 components, maybe a playground, maybe it's a basketball court, and maybe it's a picnic shelter or a piece of open turf. And I have access to that all-important trail that we saw in the survey. It also may mean I'm at a little bit larger park and I have access to 6 components. So I have access to a playground, a basketball court, a tennis court, a picnic shelter, a piece of open turf, and maybe the dog park. So 6 different components can add up to that purple area. So again, purple is good. If I live in a purple area, I've kind of met that target. If I live in a yellow area, I have access to something, but it's not meeting that level that we're desiring to get to. And if I live in a gray area, again, I have to go outside of that 10-minute walk to get to kind of that level of service. I will note that we did not include the Sun City parks in the level of service analysis and assume that some Sun City up north is providing that level of service to their community. So the big question is, are we providing parks or providing this level of service where people live? And so we can compare that purple yellow map to census data, and we can see that 23% of the population of Georgetown lives in a purple area. 23% meets that walkable target. 32% have walkable access to something, and 47% of the population lives outside of that walkable distance. I think the thing to celebrate here is that over half of the people in Georgetown can walk to something. And really what we need to do is focus on not only those people that don't have service, but we have 32% of the population that live close to something. Can we just bump that up? Can we make that better and turn that 32% or that yellow area purple? So we can also look at a broader, maybe Georgetown is never going to be 100% walkable. What if we look at a 1 mile radius? So if I have to get in my car or get on my bike and go just a little bit farther, go outside of that 10-minute walk, what is our level of service? Hello. So again, we did kind of all the same analysis, did the orange gradient map. I've just shown the big purple yellow map here as kind of a cut through, if you will. 57% of Georgetown lives within 1 mile of that target park or that target area. So I think we've really increased that level. When we broaden that service area for parks, if we go out to that 1 mile, we expect people, yes, they're going to have to drive in Georgetown to get to that level of service. And overall, we're at, almost 83% of the population lives within 1 mile of some recreation opportunity. And again, these numbers don't include the Sun City populations either. So actually the percentages are a little bit better if we assume that Sun City is getting provided that level of service up there. So I think this is, again, something else we can celebrate, something else that we can build on, is that a pretty high percentage live within 1 mile of that opportunity. I'm going to turn it over to Mick here to do the indoor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mick Massey, and I'm with Barker Rinker Seacat Architecture, or BRS, we've been referring to as ourselves tonight. We are a firm that focuses on recreation architecture. I'll tell you what we don't do. We don't do schools. We don't do high rises. We don't do apartment buildings, multifamily. We don't do retail. We do recreation architecture. And we do that because our partners will tell you that it brings joy to them to be able to work with communities to put in place buildings that improve the quality of life of the residents in those communities. So that's been our focus. And we have worked in over 250 recreation opportunities or centers around the United States. And not one community center, recreation center, senior center, aquatic center. Not one of those is like another. They're custom to that community. And we do that because it needs to fit the community that it's in order to draw the people into it. That's a longer story for another day about how you get to that point. But right now we're in this master plan and in this findings portion of the big picture of what's going on in Georgetown, Texas. And that we want to walk through what we have found so far. So we needed to start someplace. So we started with what we call the Environmental Systems Research Institute. A lot of planners use this tool. It's called ESRI for short. And we use the 2021 population estimate of 74,198. Now that number is likely to change when the results are published for the 2020 census. So we'll make adjustments as we go along. So you can kind of see, based on the theme of this evening, this is all a work in progress. But we had to make some assumptions. And so we started with the ESRI population of 74,000. And we noticed that the existing recreation center has 67,000, almost 68,000 square feet. And that this is your single indoor recreation facility, and it offers a wide variety of full service programs. And that would things like where you can drop in for fitness, play ball, basketball. You've got an indoor aquatic space, community spaces, and so on. So a lot of you have been there and you know how great this facility is. And it tries to address the needs across all spectrums of ages. Now, we wanted to understand what the market for this recreation center is. So you see that blue star right in the middle of Georgetown. That's your existing recreation center. And we wanted to understand who and how many people are coming to this recreation center within a 10-minute drive. You heard about 10-minute walkability. Most people are going to have to get into a vehicle to come to the recreation center. So we wanted to understand a little bit more about that. We found that the population within that 10-minute drive in 2021 is about 59, almost 60,000 people that this recreation center would serve within 10 minutes. And in the future population estimate, it'd be almost 70,000. So the needs are growing and it's increasing. That means there's going to be an increasing amount of pressure that's going to be called into duty for this recreation center. What about a 15-minute drive? Because our experience has shown that most populations will tolerate about a 15-minute drive at the most before they get frustrated. And so what about the existing Georgetown Recreation Center population in 2021? It's no surprise that beyond your city limits, being in a metropolitan area like this, that you actually have a market that could get almost up to 180,000 people that are within a 15-minute drive of this recreation center. And if you look into the future, 206,000 people would have access to this recreation center. So you can immediately tell that there's a lot of pressure that this recreation center is trying to support. We also wanted to take a look at what others are doing. So we wanted to do some benchmarking as to the peer cities around the area, but also outside of this area. So we looked at Georgetown vicinity and we looked at Round Rock and Cedar Park as neighboring communities, New Braunfels being south of the Austin metro area. And we wanted to compare with these because they have an influx of retirees, but also they're attracting a lot of young families. Then we looked in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for communities very similar to in those demographics. And we found Allen, Texas, and Mansfield within the DFW area with similar growth patterns as Georgetown. And this was very informing for us because what we learned is that they're seeing about a 14% increase in those benchmark cities in population. And we're seeing about a 17% increase in Georgetown in that same time period in the next 5 years. So we know that these other cities can inform us as to how they're thinking, and it might go a long way in this master planning effort. So what I want to do is I want to call your attention to this table on the left that's in blue. It says current indoor recreation level. First of all, you'll notice that we're focusing on the total square feet of public indoor recreation opportunities. And those are rec centers, you see in the RC, community centers, senior centers, and aquatic centers. Then it has those square footages breakdown. It has the ESRI population in 2021. And then it shows per square foot per capita. And if you look at, say, for example, Allen, Texas, at 95,000 square feet of offering at 110,000 population, you can quickly see that it's 0.8% or 0.87 square feet per capita. And this is just a good quick reference to understand how Georgetown stacks up. Well, if you drop down to the bottom, you'll notice that the average level of service of the benchmark cities is 0.69 square feet per capita. And Georgetown is sitting pretty at 0.92. So things look pretty good right now. We happen to know that Allen, Texas, if you look at this table on the right about the future, that they're growing fast and they're trying to anticipate that level of service of their citizens. We just broke ground on a project that we designed for them in Allen, and they're adding 146,000 square feet of recreation center to increase their square footage to 244,000 square feet, or raising their square foot per capita 1.98. And that's factoring in the growth up to 2026. So they're really taking a big notice about providing that level of service. And I'm just going to pause here. I'm going to kind of get off script for a second. I will tell you that during COVID, we watched how communities are starting to put a lot more emphasis on recreation locally. Because what happened when COVID hit, people were looking for ways to get outdoors, go into their community and recreate. So there's a lot of emphasis on the local aspect of providing level of service. Back on script here for a second. Let's look at Cedar Park. Now there, we happen to know, because we've been talking with them, that they don't have a bond referendum that they're targeting right now. They don't have plans right now, but they think in the next year that they might, very well likely, and they think they might double the size of what their offerings are. But look what happens to their square foot per capita if nothing happens. It goes from 0.7 to 0.61. And New Braunfels just opened Das Rec within the last 3 to 4 years. They're not planning any more increases either, but their increase in population takes them from 0.96 to 0.83. Now, Round Rock is right now engaged in a study, and they have plans, but they're not solidified yet. And the city council is likely going to be deliberating about that. But today, they're looking at a plan of 20,000 square foot expansion of Clay Madsen Recreation Center and a possible indoor field house and recreation center with some aquatics that would dramatically increase their offering to 1.86 square feet if everything holds true in their plans today. They recognize that they want to provide that level of service, and that's what they're planning. Now, poor Mansfield, these are good friends of mine as well. They're at 21,700 square feet today at 0.28, and that's really low in the spectrum, and they recognize that. And they're looking at plans that put about 100,000 more square feet into their system, bringing them up to 1.39 in the next 5 years. So when we take a look at the future and we see what other peer cities are doing, they're planning for that growth. They're planning to raise that level of service. And if Georgetown does nothing, we'll see it stay at 0.78 while our peer cities average at around 1.3. So it's informing us that there's a dramatic increase in the indoor recreation in our benchmark cities. So we wanted to know about the existing recreation center. What are the conditions there? Is it a building that is a candidate for increasing in size or renovation to maybe come up to raise that level of service? And so we did an assessment similar to what the parks were used, how they assess the outdoor components. And we looked at the physical conditions, and we wanted to, you can see in those bullets, is it new or like new? Is it in good condition? Is it average condition? Is it near the end of its life cycle? Is it very worn or damaged? We wanted to look at all those aspects of this and then assess the intended use. Was each space and size, I'm talking about room per room, and the configuration thereof, does it meet the requirements of the desired use or purpose? Or is it limited in the desired use or purposes, or does it not permit desired use or purpose? So going through your existing recreation center, this is an example of a multi-page document where we went room by room and graded and evaluated each space. And here's what our findings were. There's an existing building envelope, which is what you think it is. It's the structure. And it is in average condition for the building's age, which is a good thing. And there's an existing interior building condition, which is the average condition for its age as well. But what we found out for the assessment of intended use is that each space in size and configuration functions, some of those are limited and they're to the desired use or purpose, especially in adult fitness, child watch, and gymnasium spaces. And that kind of was validated by the public survey when we heard from the public through the survey. Not large enough for the demand. No surprise that an aging building is going to have furniture, fixtures, and equipment that might need to be, looked at. It's showing some age, maybe improvements into some wayfinding signage, and some increases in or improvements in the lobby area. As far as space size and configurations that do not meet, or not meeting the desired purpose, we know that this building needs some technology upgrades. I will tell you that the fitness equipment nowadays is all wired and connected to the internet in some way. And your fitness area, potential esports program, your existing sound system, all of those improvements are needed there. Also staff support. A building is only going to be able to run if you have strong support and staff. And that includes things like storage. Being able to call a room into a multi-purpose means having the storage capacity to support that room changing over to a new program. And then you currently have two entries. You have the entry that dates back to when before the recreation center was expanded and modified. And you've got that shares a space with the seniors and the teens. Well, the two entries is sort of a little bit of an efficiency there. And so we'd like to look at ways to try to make that more efficient, less labor intensive. It's no surprise that the biggest cost of operating a building is going to be the people. It takes the number of people to run it. So if we can design a building that is efficient in its use and requires less people, then it costs less to operate. As far as the seniors and teen space goes, you have such a robust teen and children's program that it actually pauses the senior offerings in the summer. And that may be something to take a look at in the next visioning section of this. It's very difficult for buses to maneuver with the bus drop-off area. It's a little inadequate, and the parking is typically overrun and is a little bit inadequate. So those are some quick observations that we wanted to share with you. So where are we today in this big picture? Well, we're here to report that you've got a market that is strong in the Georgetown service area, that the existing level of service is changing rapidly due to the increase in population. The existing facility is in average condition for its age, and its appearance is becoming a little outdated, but it is a candidate for renovation and expansion, and it can contribute to the next level of offerings through this master plan. To what capacity, we'll have to figure out as we move through this together and on to the next phase. Public input indicates that you all desire to have more gymnasium space. That'll help with that pickleball public that's out there, which I'm excited about. And then fitness. These are no surprises. In community we go to, each communities we go to, fitness, weights, cardio, equipment, group exercise is usually really, really high, as is gymnasium. And usually walk, jog tracks are going to be pretty high in that list too. So our best practices and would say that you are a candidate for a new multi-generational recreation center, and it was kind of enforced through the public survey data as well. And that will help balance the system of the indoor needs to provide year-round services. So that's kind of where we are in the findings stage. I look forward to as we move forward into the visioning. So I'm going to pass this on to Dan Cedar.
All right, so next steps, as I had mentioned before, really the next steps, we've kind of thrown all this information at the project team, the staff, the public. And really the next steps are tomorrow is we're meeting with the project team, doing what we call a visioning session and really going through like the key findings Mick had listed, a lot of those key issues that came up that Dave discussed, and then looking at the other analysis that we've done with the programs and the overall system of the Parks and Recreation Department, and just kind of going through what we call a visioning session. So talking through those key issues, looking at those key findings, and then starting to look at preliminary recommendations or where we see this plan going. We'll then take that information back as a project team on the consultant side and then start to develop, as I said, an action plan with some recommendations and a draft of the overall document. And then that next step would be bringing that document in with those action items to present again in a public setting, as well as with the project team and looking for more feedback. So that's where we're at. This is a lot of information that we've hit everybody with. And I appreciate you sitting through the presentation tonight. And I think we kept it in a pretty good time slot as well. The next steps are questions, comments that you might have. And I know we also may have some through Zoom. I think I can, or, oh, sorry. Yeah. So you asked, is there a city budget for, was it? We don't have budget numbers. No, that would be the next steps. If, let's say there was a recommendation to look at expansion of the facility or a new facility, those next steps are going into those studies and then determining what the best fit is going to be. Do you want to speak more to that process? And so we wouldn't specifically call out, you must build a 100,000 square foot facility right now, but those next steps could be identifying there is a need, and we may have a recommendation to lead to those next action items.
It's a great question because ultimately there's going to need to be a number placed on some of these improvements for the entire system. And you asked the question about indoor. What we find is that indoor recreation typically is the most expensive to build and the most expensive to operate. And so what you want to do is from this high level, look at, do we need a recreation center? Probably the findings are going to say, and the result, if we jump ahead, would likely say, yes, there would be an approximate size based on the needs and the best practices and what the public is saying. I would recommend after that is adopted that a feasibility study be done to really drill down to identify each space and the square footage of the recreation center with a business plan so that you know what it costs to operate, what kind of revenue potential it is, so that you can address all those concerns that any citizen would have about how you would afford it, make sure it can fit into your system and it's not obsolete the day you open it. So planning your work and working your plan basically, but it starts with this really high level right now. Do we need it? Would the public support it? That sort of thing. And it's a little early to be able to answer that completely until we know more about what your needs are. Is that fair?
Yeah. I've got something to add as well that
Yeah, I just want to add another component to what you asked about. There's not a budget for the master plan. The master plan is going to be a guiding document for us, and it will inform us on the priorities that the citizens want. It will inform us on the cost, the estimated cost. And so that will give staff and our city council the information they need to do budget and planning. So these requests that we're asking, well, we're not asking for them. The priorities will need to be budgeted. And so we will have to layer in requests for either bonds potentially. That's where there was some support for special projects for bonds. Some of the things might be able to be addressed in our maintenance budget. They might be small. They might be, little low-hanging fruit, that it won't take very much money for us to make some of these improvements. But all this is like it's a guiding document that helps us plan for budgeting for capital improvements. So I hope did I answer your question? Okay. Yes. But the employees pay, it's part of their benefits with the city of Georgetown. Yes. Right, it's part of the wellness program for the city. Yeah, it's part of that program. I think we have somebody on.
Yeah, and I was just going to reiterate, I failed to mention at the very start what a master plan is. And a master plan is kind of that 30,000 foot view of your overall system. It doesn't nail directly into, that specific project, but we may call out, looking at those future projects. So we're taking that 30,000 foot view with a master plan. And I should have said that up front.
Okay, we have someone from Zoom that would like to make a comment. Conley Giles, we will unmute you and you will be able to speak. You'll have to accept that request and you should be able to speak.
Yes, you mentioned that one of your key sources for data does not track pickleball. Does Greenplay track pickleball? And if so, how do you track it? And then given that pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the US, does Greenplay take this seriously in their assessment of the actual future needs for courts and facilities based on the sport's growth?
I'll start, and then if somebody wants to follow up, they can. We do know pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports. We do know different communities look at it different ways. Through this survey, it was found that it is in terms of meeting the needs, but we also know that, and this could end up being part of the overall, is there a need where pickleball might become a bigger thing here based on the population and the people that play? Those are things we'll work through as we go through the key issues. But we do know with Greenplay that we know pickleball is growing. It's growing everywhere. It's growing in my community nonstop. We do look at what you have in terms of pickleball courts and the availability. We don't have the specific numbers like David mentioned with NRPA. They don't track that benchmarking number. But overall, we look at it. I don't know, Dave, do you want to add anything in terms of your inventory with pickleball? Yeah. Yeah, it's just not being tracked right now on a national level, but we do look at it individually in each community and based on the feedback we receive. I mean, we did hear pickleball is important. We know there's a need out there for the pickleball, but we're also looking at where does that fit in with all the other needs and how well is it meeting the needs of the community? And I can say through the survey, most of the community feels pickleball is being met in terms of it meeting the needs of our community.
Okay, on Zoom, Sharon Reed, you have your hand raised. We will give you permission to speak.
Yes, thank you. I'm resident of Sun City on the west side. I know that a lot of people here, we have a big cycling club. There's also, I think, 4 or 5 other cycling clubs in Georgetown. I think that, we're concerned about the connectivity of the trails. And so I know that we put forth a possibility of a project for Rails to Trail to connect Georgetown trails to Weir and possibly later Granger, using the abandoned rail bed that's out there that's been abandoned for many, many years. Grants should be available from governmental and private foundations to help get that built. But it would need the support of the city for that to happen, also coordination with Williamson County. The other trail that is available to connect is a trail from Berry Springs Park that goes under the interstate, but then stops. That trail could also be connected to streets that are on the west side that would give connectivity for hike bike trails from the west side, including all of Sun City to Berry Springs Park. I didn't hear any of that mentioned. In fact, I only heard bike one single time in the whole presentation.
We are looking at the trails. Covey, one of the main focus areas Covey's looking at is the trails and the connectivity. And that's where we did list the partners. I don't know if we had those listed on alternative providers and other partners, but those are partners we will specifically want to call out in the plan too, as you work towards the trails and the connections and the bike trails and even the walking trails, is knowing who the partners are in the community, know who are leading those projects, and that we're all working together as we expand the system throughout and make those connections.
And I'll just add, that's going to be part of our visioning session where we actually put all the pieces together. Tonight was really just bringing you the findings of what we found in the survey. Nothing's been decided, nothing's been designed or anything like that. This is just really reporting back what we heard from the community. So we definitely want to take advantage of any partnerships out there and opportunities for trail connectivity. So thank you for that.
You know, we know safety is an issue that typically doesn't fall under parks. So a lot of times when we look at accessibility to parks or those safety type issues, it's making sure the departments within the city are working together, understanding how can we make it safer to get to a park? Is it safer to put in a crosswalk so that kids can access it? The Parks Department's not in charge of that, but it's working together because we have had plans where we've had to address those safety issues. Just getting across the regular road, you know, we've had people bring up, would it be better to put in speed bumps? And those are things they'll have to look at internally as a city, but we do bring into those safety issues and those connections.
I mean, are you
Yeah.
gonna tear up a fire truck or a kid? Also, like the big crosswalk through. A lot of people from when you cross crosswalks. Well, I'm not going to get into the design of San Gabriel Park right now. But as you saw in the survey results, some of the high priorities were safety and maintenance and lighting. So knowing that, then staff and the consultant team will dive into that a little bit deeper. There's a lot of comments that were provided, which help us kind of pinpoint what are the actual problems. And I know we've taken, comments from you before and others, but, we don't want to make drastic sudden changes until we have a comprehensive plan. So I do think there's opportunity to address some of those issues. The speed bump thing is a fire department thing. Maybe we can work on them. The lighting of the rest of the trail. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the main lighting in the park, those were the old silver poles. And for some reason, those were put in by the electric department in the 80s. And then those lines got severed and it was an easy fix. So we got those fixed, but we have made a decision not to light the trails anymore because of the fact that they're in, a lot of them are in the floodplain. And so we had 18 poles lost in the 2007 flood. And so a lot of communities, if you look at them, they don't like their hike and bike trails at all. They're dawn to dusk. So we do have a benefit out there that most communities don't have. But the new standard is not to continue to light the trails. They're really just dawn to dusk. There could be some safety, some lighting at certain key intersections to ensure that there's pedestrian, so people know there's pedestrians in that area, but we don't have any plans to continue lighting the trail up and down the South San Gabriel River. Is there any other questions out there? Yes. You meaning the amount of water that comes down or the quality of the water? So we have a stormwater staff person outside of our department that's her main role and job, because I can't, I've just escaped me. MS4 permit. So we have to follow the MS4 permit guidelines. Mhm. Yeah, I think now that we have the results of the survey, that we will definitely be looking at that at a deeper level. And we do have partners throughout the city and the Corps of Engineers, actually the lake, we've attempted to do that before. We've done studies to take over the lake, and the feasibility just was not there for the city to take that over years ago. But there are partnerships out there that we will definitely explore. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the public? Anyone else on Zoom have a question?
For those of you that walked in, if you pick up one of these, we do have the website. This is a website we designed for the project. We've been posting all of our findings and information. And each time we've come out, well, I always say come out to present. This is the first time we've been out to present, but when we had our first engagement sessions in those meetings and just trying to communicate with the residents. So feel free to grab one of these or go to gtxparkplan.com. It's just, we'll keep updating everything. We'll put a video of the presentation. We'll put the presentation up once we get through everything. And it's just a way to get more information out. And you can also sign up and put questions through there as well. What's that? Sorry. I can't. Oh, yeah. Yep. Once the survey results are completely finalized, we've gone through them and they look good. We just double check spelling and everything else. That will be, presented to the staff as a public document that they put out, and we'll put it up on the site. Yep. I can't give you an exact date, but hopefully in the next week or two. Anything else? I want to thank everyone for coming out. For those of you on Zoom, thank you for spending the time with us. And we appreciate everyone being here and being a part of this process. And we're looking forward to continuing on. Thank you.
Thank you.